Your Bible never names the serpent in Eden. One ancient book does, and it survives in one language. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 AD, banned, hidden, called dangerous by the church. But in Ethiopia, the Orthodox Church never stopped reading it. Their Geza manuscripts preserved every name the Western Bibles lost, including Gadriel's. Chapter 69 of 1st Enoch says a watcher named Gadriel led Eve astray, and then taught men to build weapons. In the next several minutes, you'll see the verse, the manuscript that carried it, and why the name vanished. If forbidden biblical history fascinates you, hit subscribe. Every week, we uncover another name the church tried to bury. If you open Genesis 3, all you get is this. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. That is the entire introduction. He arrives in the first line of the chapter with no name, no rank, no origin, and no explanation of what he is doing there. He is called a beast of the field, which places him among the animals God had finished making 2 chapters earlier. He speaks, he argues, he is cursed to go on his belly, and then he leaves the story. Genesis never tells you who he was. Almost everything you think you know about that scene was added later and from outside. The Wisdom of Solomon says that through the envy of the devil, death entered the world, which is probably the earliest surviving hint that anyone read the serpent as something other than a snake. Revelation 12 verse 9 calls the dragon that ancient serpent. The devil and Satan, in that single verse, is the reason most people alive today assume the two are the same being. Neither of those books is Genesis. Both are centuries downstream of it, reading backwards. The rabbis, meanwhile, reach for a different answer entirely. Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says the serpent did nothing and said nothing except by the intention of Samael, who wrote it the way a man rides a horse. 3 traditions, 3 answers, and the canonical text, the one on your shelf, supplying none of them. But the older Jewish tradition was not nearly so restrained. The list survived, but only because someone took it the long way round. In 1773, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce was coming home from Ethiopia. He had spent 6 years in the highlands chasing the source of the Blue Nile. And he came back with 3 copies of the complete Book of Enoch in Ge'ez, the ancient liturgical language of Ethiopian Christianity. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church had never stopped reading it. The Western churches had simply forgotten. One of Bruce's 3 copies went to the Bodleian Library at Oxford, one to the Royal Library in Paris, and one he kept at the family house in Scotland. The Bodleian copy sat on a shelf for nearly 50 years while nobody opened it. In 1821, an Oxford man named Richard Lawrence finally translated it into English, working, by his own account, in a library that had no particular enthusiasm about lending him the manuscript. In 1912, R.H. Charles produced the standard critical edition through Oxford University Press, working from Ge'ez, Aramaic, and Greek witnesses at the same time. When I quote from 1st Enoch in this episode, I am quoting from Charles. Now, normally, this is the point in the episode where I tell you about the desert. In 1952, Bedouin of the Tamira tribe found the cave that scholars label Cave 4, sitting within sight of the ruins at Qumran. It held the wreckage of a library, roughly 15,000 fragments from more than 500 manuscripts, and among them were 11 fragmentary copies of the Book of Enoch in its original Aramaic. Paleographers date the oldest of them, catalogued as Fragment 4 Q201, to around 200 BC. A Polish priest named Józef Milik spent decades reassembling the pieces and published the result through Oxford's Clarendon Press in 1976. It remains the foundation of the field, and in all 11 of those Aramaic manuscripts, across every chapter the fragments touch, there is not one word of chapters 37 through 71. That block is missing. Scholars call it the Book of Parables, and it is the only section of Enoch the caves did not hand back, which matters here more than it has ever mattered in this series, because chapter 69 sits inside it. The one chapter on earth that names the whisperer in the garden is the one chapter the desert never confirmed. In one book, in one language, the third was named, and nothing in the Aramaic came along behind it to back the claim up. So here is what the text says. 1 Enoch, chapter 69, beginning at verse 4. The name of the first Jekon, that is, the one who led astray all the sons of God and brought them down to the earth, and led them astray through the daughters of men. And the second was named Asbeel. He imparted to the holy sons of God evil counsel, and led them astray so that they defiled their bodies with the daughters of men. And the third was named Gadriel. He it is who showed the children of men all the blows of death. And he led astray Eve, and showed the weapons of death to the sons of men, the shield and the coat of mail, and the sword for battle, and all the weapons of death to the children of men. And from his hand they have proceeded against those who dwell on the earth from that day and forevermore. And the fourth was named Penemu. He taught the children of men the bitter and the sweet, and he taught them all the secrets of their wisdom. That is 1 Enoch chapter 69, verses 4 through 8, exactly as Charles rendered it in 1912. Two things about that passage before we do anything with it. The first is a printer's mark. In Charles's edition, part of verse 6 sits inside square brackets. Charles suspected that the clause about the weapons of death had been imported from elsewhere in the book, and rather than quietly deleting it, he flagged it and left it in view. That is the sort of scholarly manners this whole field runs on. Nickelsburg and Vanderkam's commentary on chapters 37 through 82, published by Fortress in 2011, is where a modern reader goes to check the judgment. The second is simpler, and almost everyone misses it. Gadriel is not on the famous list. He is not among the 20 chiefs who swore the oath on the summit of Mount Hermon in chapter 6. This is a second roster, 5 names long, from a different part of the book, and Enoch does not call these 5 chiefs. He calls them Satans. Now look at what the list actually is, because the order matters. 5 names, and notice what each one is charged with. Not crafts, not metallurgy, not astrology, not the cutting of roots, which is how chapter 8 distributes its lessons. These 5 are charged with acts of persuasion. Jekon talked the sons of God into descending. Asbeel supplied the counsel that let them justify what they had done. Both of those are recruitment offenses. Both belong squarely to the flood generation, to the era of the oath and the giants and the 200. Gadriel does not. Gadriel's crime happens in the garden. Before the flood, before the oath, before Mount Hermon, before there was a second generation of human beings to corrupt. Chronologically, he is the first rebel in the entire Enochic story, older than every watcher this channel has covered. And the scribe files him third, between 2 recruiters, with no comment on the jump. The third was named, and he is badly out of sequence, and nobody in the text finds this worth mentioning. Then there is the double charge, which is the strangest sentence in the chapter. Gadriel gets 2 things. He led astray Eve, and he showed men the shield, the coat of mail, and the sword for battle, a seduction and an armory in a single breath, about a single being, with no connective tissue between them at all. The scribe does not explain the link. He does not appear to think one is required. One reading, and I want to offer it as a reading rather than a conclusion, is that he saw persuasion and weaponry as the same technology. That talking somebody into something and arming somebody are the 2 available methods of making a person move, and that both were taught on the same afternoon by the same instructor. If that is what he meant, it is a very old and very unsentimental idea about how human beings actually get organized. There is also a problem with that armory, and honesty requires naming it. Chapter 8 of the same book has already handed out the sword, the knife, the shield, and the breastplate. It gave them to Azazel. Now chapter 69 assigns nearly the identical list to a different angel with a different name. 2 chapters, 1 book, 1 craft, 2 teachers. That kind of duplication is one of several reasons scholars read the parables as a separate composition stitched into Enoch rather than a continuation of it, and it is precisely why Charles put his brackets where he did. Finally, the name itself. Gadriel is usually explained through a Semitic root meaning a wall or a fence, giving something along the lines of wall of God. Modern Hebrew still uses gator for a fence, I want to be careful with this one because that etymology travels mostly through reference works rather than through primary scholarship. And angel names in this book are notoriously slippery, with the same figure appearing under 3 spellings in 3 languages. But if it holds, the irony does its own work without any help from me. The angel name for a boundary is the one who talked a woman across one. And then the consequences arrived. Chapter 69 does not sit inside a narrative. It sits inside a courtroom. The parables are 3 long visions of judgment, and this roster of 5 names is embedded in the third of them, which means the sentence follows almost immediately after the charges are read. Here is Charles again, chapter 69, verses 27 and 28. And he sat on the throne of his glory, and the sum of judgment was given unto the Son of Man, and he caused the sinners to pass away, and be destroyed from off the face of the earth, and those who have led the world astray. With chains shall they be bound, and in their assemblage place of destruction shall they be imprisoned, and all their works vanish from the face of the earth. Now compare that with what happens to Azazel back in chapter 10. There, God speaks to Raphael by name. Bind Azazel hand and foot, cast him into the darkness, make an opening in the desert which is in Dudel, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks. That is a personal sentence, delivered to a named archangel, executed at a named location, with a stated duration attached to it. It is the most specific punishment in the entire book, and it is the reason Azazel gets the documentaries. Gadriel gets none of that. No archangel is dispatched for him. No prison is named. No rocks, no 70 generations, no year of release. He is swept up in a plural, with chains shall they be bound, and shut into somewhere the text describes only as their assemblage place of destruction. Nobody knows where that is because the text does not care enough to say. The being credited with the single most consequential act in human history, in this book's own account of things, is sentenced in a group without being addressed. The third was named and then convicted without ever being spoken to. There is one clause in that verdict worth sitting with. All their works vanish from the face of the earth. And the works, in Gadriel's case, have been itemized 4 verses earlier. The shield, the coat of mail, the sword for battle. 2,000 years on, that is the part of the sentence that has not been carried out. In my reading, the erasure did not happen the way the title of this episode suggests, but something did happen, and the trail of it is visible, and you can go and stand in front of most of it. Start with the language. Chapter 69 exists complete in exactly one tongue on this planet. Not Hebrew, not Aramaic, because the caves did not have it. Not Greek, because the surviving Greek witnesses to Enoch break off before they reach it. Ge'ez, the liturgical language of the Ethiopian highlands, spoken by nobody now as a mother tongue, and read aloud in church every week, which means the chain of custody is short and completely traceable. Ethiopian scribes copied that chapter by hand, generation after generation, in a country most European churchmen could not have located on a map. Bruce carried 3 of those copies out in 1773. Lawrence sat in the Bodleian in 1821 with one of them open in front of him and produced the first English sentence that named the angel who spoke to Eve. Charles refined the wording in 1912. Every version you have ever encountered, including the one I read to you a few minutes ago, runs back up that line to a scribe in the highlands who had no idea the rest of the world had lost it. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church still holds Enoch as scripture today. It is the only church on earth that does. The fingerprint is right there, and it is a manuscript. Then there is the second trace, and this one is not ancient at all. It is an academic fight, and it has run through my own lifetime. Melik, having reassembled the Aramaic and found no parables anywhere in it, drew the conclusion that the evidence seemed to demand. He argued in 1976 that the entire section was a Christian composition from somewhere around 270 AD. If Melik was right, Gadriel is not a Second Temple tradition at all. He is a 3rd century invention, and this episode is a documentary about a piece of late fiction. That claim did not go unanswered. Michael Knibb published a careful and rather devastating review of the dating argument, in the journal New Testament Studies. Ephraim Isaac, translating directly from the Geza in 1983, wrote that he was convinced 1st Enoch already contained the parables by the end of the 1st century AD. And in June of 2005, 44 scholars traveled to a monastery at Camaldoli in Italy for the 3rd Enoch seminar, convened by Gabriele Boccaccini of the University of Michigan, for the single purpose of settling when these chapters were written. Paolo Sacchi wrote the closing summary. Every specialist who addressed the dating question directly, he reported, arrived at roughly the time of Herod. Eerdmans published the proceedings in 2007. Milik's date did not survive the room. So here is the shape of the thing. A name that was never in the Bible, that never surfaced in the desert, that was carried out of Africa by a Scotsman who had gone looking for a river, that was translated by a man working in a library which did not want to lend him the book, and that was argued over in this century by a monastery full of specialists who flew in from 4 continents to do it. The third was named, and nobody has yet managed to unname him. Which brings us to the question underneath this whole episode. In my reading, chapter 69 is not really an alternative version of the Eden story. The garden takes up 1 clause of 1 verse. What the chapter is actually doing is making an argument about where persuasion comes from, and the answer it gives is bleak. The voice that talks you into a thing and the hand that arms you afterwards belong to the same teacher. Enoch's scribe does not present that as a paradox to be resolved. He presents it as an inventory. And yet one detail refuses, at least for me, to sit straight, and it is that printer's mark. Charles bracketed the weapons clause in verse 6 because it looks imported from chapter 8. If his brackets are right, then Gadriel's original charge was the garden alone. 1 act, 1 sentence, and the swords were added later by a scribe tidying up somebody else's duplication. If his brackets are wrong, the double charge is the whole point of the verse, and everything I just said about persuasion in armaments is the scribe's own theology rather than my reading of an accident. I have looked at that sentence in Charles, in Nib, and in Nickelsburg and Vanderkam. I have not made up my mind. As for the title of this episode, here is the honest answer. God did not erase the name. Genesis never carried it in the first place. The caves never confirmed it, and the West simply mislaid the book that held it for something like 1400 years, until a traveler with other priorities brought it back almost by accident. 3 ordinary failures of transmission, rather than 1 act of deletion. The third was named, and the name outlived every institution that lost it. Next time, we stay on the same list and move down exactly 1 name. Penemu, verse 8 of the same chapter. He taught the children of men the bitter and the sweet, which nobody has ever satisfactorily explained, and then he taught them writing with ink and paper. And the scribe adds that thereby many sinned from eternity to eternity, and until this day. An angel condemned for the invention of literacy, in a book that only reached you because somebody wrote it down. I have wanted to make that one for a long time. Before you go, the question. Chapter 69 charges Gadriel with 2 things: the deception in the garden and the manufacture of weapons. Do you think the scribe meant those as 2 separate crimes or as 1? I do read the comments on these, so tell me which way you lean and why. If you enjoyed this one, give it a like. It genuinely helps the channel, and subscribing means you will not miss the next one. See you then.